श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय। अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराजनी जय। प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजनी जय। महंत स्वामी महाराजनी जय। प्रमुख स्वामी महाराज शताब्दी महोत्सवनी जय। परम पूज्य प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजना जीवन चरित्रનો અભ્યાસ અત્યારે આપણે કરી રહ્યા છીએ. We are covering from 1940 to 1945 of Pramukh Swami Maharaj's life. And just having a quick overview. આપણને બધાના મળી ગયું છે નોટ્સમાં, but it's very important to understand just so we know the chronological order of the events. એવું નથી કે આપણે બધું મોડે કરવાનું છે, પણ આપણા મનમાં ખ્યાલ આવે કે what sort of time scale we are talking about. So up till now we've covered 1940, 1941 and 1942 of Bapa's life. અને આજે we'll be covering 1943, 1944 and 1945. એક વર્ષના લગભગ 4-5 પ્રસંગો હોય છે, અને આજે આપણને ખ્યાલ આવશે કે એ રીતે પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજના જીવનમાં શાસ્ત્રીજી સાથેના પ્રસંગો અને એ વખતે આ રીતે શાસ્ત્રીજી સાથે વિચરણમાં જોડાઈ ગયા હોય. અત્યાર સુધી પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજ's studies, we looked at many of those prasangs, and now we'll look at more prasangs of when Swami was with Shastriji Maharaj in Vicharan. And also at that time, the Atladra Mandir was opened in 1945. So we'll be taking those prasangs as well today. So last time, the last prasang we saw was from 1943, when Swami went for darshan at the Gopinathji Maharaj Mandir in Gadra. And ત્યાં પ્રસાદી મળી, પણ બાપાએ બધું સહન કર્યું. So we heard about that, and Shastriji Maharaj laughed or smiled at the santos. Shastriji Maharaj asked, how was the honor? Sanman kevu thayu? And Swami said, look, you knew what was going to happen. Why did you still tell us to go there? And Shastriji Maharaj said, look, you get to understand or experience what we've been through. And then Shastriji Maharaj also gave blessings. This is the last time that you will be insulted in this way. So a prasang that Swami learned in his early years when he went to Gadra for darshan. Many of these prasangs are taken in the book. Sometimes they seem very ordinary to us, but they highlight to us these are the sort of things that used to happen in those days. The difficulties that Shastriji Maharaj endured. Again, Yogiji Maharaj, Nirgunda Swami, Pramukh Swami Maharaj as well. They went through all these things. It wasn't easy sailing, but these things used to happen. But Amati Pan, Bapa often did smurti of these prasangs in his later years as well. All these prasangs that happened with Shastriji Maharaj, and that's why we know these prasangs. So, a prasang about when they encountered thieves. Shastriji Maharaj had gone to Nagasar. This is in Uttar Gujarat. And they stayed for a few days. Hari Bhaktas generously gave dharmado, where the group of sadhus and the devotees, they're together. એટલે આ ધર્માડો તો લઈ જવાનો હોય, ધારો કે બોચાસન લઈ જવાનો હોય કે સારંગપુર લઈ જવાનો હોય. So certain thieves that were hanging around in those areas, all the way from Vadodara, they heard about, these Hari Bhaktas must have given some money. And they went all the way there to Nagasar. And Shastriji Maharaj, on the day he was about to leave, he was going to take the 5 o'clock train to Viramgam. So very early in the morning, he must have left the Uttaro. And there were 2 bullock carts. In the first one was Shastriji Maharaj and Swami Shri and another Hari Bhakta. And the other sadhus and some Hari Bhaktas were in the other Bharat Garu. And there were 2 Hari Bhaktas, Chaturbai and Rauji Bai. They were leading the way. And, they had rifles on their shoulders. So you can't imagine what it was like in those times, that people were afraid of thieves. And Chaturbai, thinking that these guys might be laborers, he actually did see the thieves, but didn't realize that they were thieves. So assuming they were laborers, he just continued. And when these guys had passed, the 2 bullock carts came. And the thieves, they attacked these bullock carts. So throwing wooden sticks, like we have javelin sticks, they must have made some wooden sticks, and they attacked the bullock carts. And one of the sticks even flew between Swami Shri and Vinayak Rao. So you can see that, and then obviously they realized that they'd been attacked. So they shouted, "Thieves, thieves," and they started driving away as fast as possible. And the thieves even had guns, so they even fired those, and the debris from those bullets hit one of the sadhus, Pramukh Swami. Thankfully, he wasn't that seriously injured. So these are the sort of things that happened. And fortunately, nothing seriously. The Santos and Hari Bhaktas managed to get away. The devotees then told Shastriji Maharaj, "Look, you shouldn't travel so early in the morning. There's a great risk." But Shastriji Maharaj just joked it off and said, "Look, at least આ રીતે આપણે ભગવાનની સેવા તો કરીએ છીએ. Many say that, we were robbed, at least we saw the thieves. But in our case, we saw the thieves, but we didn't get robbed." So despite these difficulties, Swami experienced all these difficulties and saw what Shastriji Maharaj was going through. Last time we saw the train prasang. But despite these difficulties, everyone retained a positive attitude. So this prasang Swami Shri must have also remembered in his later years. And then there was a parayan in Nashik. Again, now these parayans, Shastriji Maharaj used to go to these parayans at the request of the Hari Bhaktas. But if it was an important parayan, he would take Swami Shri with him, even though Swami Shri was very young. As we say, 1943, so barely he must have been 22 years old. But Shastriji Maharaj took Swami all the way to Nashik, and Swami Shri would also read from the Satsang Jivan and explain the shloks. And Shastriji Maharaj would be very happy on listening to Narayan Swarup Das talking from the Satsang Jivan. The author has written in the book, Swami would not repeat anything unnecessarily, saying the same thing over and over and again, or continue for too long. And in that way, everyone enjoyed listening to his discourses, which were very clear and very simple explanations. Remember, this is a granth in Sanskrit, the Satsangi Jivan. But Swami Shri was explaining it in such a way that the Hari Bhaktas would also be very pleased. One of the main guy, the Shet, who sponsored the Parayan, his name was Ramji Keshavji Shet. He said, if the sadhus are trained in this way, the splendor of the Sampradaya would shine. So again, he was very happy. And during his free time here, Swami would also sit before Shastriji Maharaj and recite the Katha. So you can see that not just purely for the Hari Bhaktas, but when they got spare time, Swami would read the Satsangi Jivan and other scriptures in front of Shastriji Maharaj. And in this way, he would please his Guru. At that time, Swami also had a chance to go to bathe in the river Godavari. આપણે કહીએ ને ભજનમાં કે ન ગઈ ગંગા ગોદાવરી કાશી. It's a very famous river. So Swami also bathed in that river while in Nashik. And after finishing in Nashik, they all went to Mumbai by train. There's a prasang in the Jivan Charitra. There was a Hari Bhakta, Narayanji Maharaj, who also used to do very good katha, but he had a bit of a scary nature. So Jagjivan Bhai was also with them on the train. Jagjivan Bhai Ruda was the one that Yogi Bappa wrote the letter that we read in Yogi Gita. Yogi Bappa wrote that letter from Rajkot to Jagjivan Bhai. So Jagjivan Bhai just joked a little bit. Okay, look, when Narayanji Maharaj explained, okay, look, there's a massive mountain and the train has suddenly stopped. What if the mountain falls on us? And at that time, Jagjivan Bhai just jokingly said, okay, look, surely that's not going to happen. The mountain's never going to fall. But then again, you never know. It could happen someday. And Narayanji Maharaj got a bit scared. What if that day happened to be today? So in this way, Shastriji Maharaj and Swami Shri enjoyed a little bit of laughter. So you can see it wasn't all serious, but you can see that this jovial atmosphere between Shastriji Maharaj, Swami Shri, and the Santos and the Hari Bhaktas. Obviously, there were a lot of difficulties, but by joking in this way, they would also keep the atmosphere very, very light. Then, again, this was again in 1943, sometime in August. A Parayan was held in Surat. So again, Shastriji Maharaj, he called Narayan Swarup Das that you come. And after reading the start of the Satsangi Jivan, the Mahatma section, Shastriji Maharaj said, Ke Narayan Swarup Das, he will read the rest of the Parayan. And everyone loved listening to Swami Shri reciting the second chapter of the Satsangi Jivan. Shastriji Maharaj was so happy. He would have the garlands around his neck. So naturally, Shastriji Maharaj as a guru would have a lot of garlands. But he took all those garlands off and then he placed them on Swami Shri. He blessed Swami Shri in this way. And on that day, Swami Shri would say the talk from the Satsang Jivan, the second chapter, and Sastri Maharaj would immensely enjoy listening to Swami Shri's sermons. But you can see that one of the photographers, a devotee, wanted to take a photograph of Sastriji Maharaj sitting on the Vyaspit. And on the Vyaspit, you can imagine there's only space for one person. But Sastriji Maharaj, he said, look, don't take my photograph. And Sastriji Maharaj moved to one side. He said, take my photograph with this nine Swarup Das, એટલે Pramukh Swami. And at that time, there were other varils as well, like Nirgunda Swami, Nayanji Maharaj was there. Sriji Swarup Das, he was also there for the Parayan. He also used to sing beautifully as well. But despite that, Sastri Maharaj insisted that Swami Shri sits next to him on the Vyaspit, and that photograph that we can see on the screen, that photograph was taken in Surat. And you can see that Swami Shri, Sastri Maharaj used to take Swami Shri's paksh, and people would also see this. And Sastri Maharaj once wrote to Swami Shri, કે તમને ભેગા રહેવાનું એટલે રાખવાનું મન થાય છે અને નવી નવી કેટલી જાણવા જેવી વાતો અને સત્સંગમાં તમારી પ્રસિદ્ધિ થાય. Sastri Maharaj wanted to tell him all these things. નવી નવી વાતો અને તમારી પ્રસિદ્ધિ થાય. That you know, that people can understand your importance. કે આ સ્વામી મુખ્ય વટ શીખ્યા છે. ભવિષ્યમાં સ્વામીનું નામ આગળ રાખે તેવા છે અને તેવા સૌને આપનો ભાર પડે. So you can see that Sastriji Maharaj had this wish from the beginning that Swami Shri nu naam agar ave. Swami Shri had no wish, but Sastri Maharaj wanted to bring him forward. So people could understand that this was a great person who will carry forward this organization in the future. And you can see Swami Shri's photograph at the age of 20, he must have been 21 and a half in 1943. How young he was, black hair, thin frame. And Sastri Maharaj was so enthusiastic for everyone to understand Swami Shri's greatness. Then another prasang that happened, again this is during Vichran. There's many prasangs like this. There was a prasang in Katlal. Sastri Maharaj, obviously they had vyavastha for him to sleep, but Swami Shri would sleep on the floor. The same thing happened in a place called Viroja. So, જ્યાં ત્યાં જેવું તેવું, જેમ તેમ ચલાવી લેતા શીખતા. And then there's one Swami was traveling with Sastri Maharaj to reach Matar and Radu. This is in Charotar. And because it was the time of the monsoon, they had to cross the river. And the water level was very high. It's not a simple way of crossing. So again, because of that, they couldn't just walk across. And they had to tie a rope to a tree on the other side. And then other people on the other side of the banks of the river, they had to hold that rope. And Swami and Ishwarbai Daji, Ishwarbai Daji is Mota Swami's brother. He had to hold the rope. They had to hang on to the rope and cross the river in this way. So despite Swami Shri's studies, they used to travel like this as well. So we heard about the traveling by train. We heard about the traveling by Barad Garu. This is how they traveled across the river. Sometimes they also had to travel by boat. So there were many difficulties, but they would continue their Vichran in this way. Along with the Vichran, Swami was still studying Sanskrit. As we explained that Bapa this time was studying in Ahmedabad. Girija Shankar Sastri was teaching Swami. And once Swami had to go to Petlad. Even in that, he would ask Sastriji Maharaj, okay, look, the exams are being taken in Petlad, should I go? Obviously, he had to go. But even in that, he would take Sastriji Maharaj's permission first, and Sastriji Maharaj would make all the vyavastha. There was a Nayandas Shet in Petlad who made all the vyavastha at Sastriji Maharaj's request. So despite the utsavs, despite other programs, despite the Vichran, and because there was shortage of sadhus in the Mandirs at that time, Swami would be involved in different sevas. But seeing that Sastriji Maharaj wanted him to study Sanskrit, Swami still continued to study Sanskrit with great vigor and properly. It's not like marti kan halave. He studied Sanskrit properly to please his guru, Sastriji Maharaj. Sastriji Maharaj also used to teach snippets from time to time to his disciple. It's not that Swami Shri didn't know what to do. In anything that Swami did, he would always take the agna of Sastriji Maharaj. But just so that people could understand the importance of Yogiji Maharaj, Sastriji Maharaj used to our prasang pan uba karta. So there's a prasang in the Jivan Charitra. You can see the page number and the chapter title as well, B35. Okay, they were in Atladra. Sastriji Maharaj, Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami, it is Swami Shri. અને જમતી વખતે શાસ્ત્રીજી Maharaj was talking to the sadhus કે તમારો કાર્યક્રમ શું છે? What is your program? So Swami Shri, obviously he said કે મારે અમદાવાદ જવાનું છે, because he was studying in Ahmedabad. And he had already taken permission to go to Ahmedabad. But when Shastri Maharaj asked him કે તમારો કાર્યક્રમ શું છે, Swami Shri said that I have to go to Ahmedabad. So Shastri Maharaj said, okay. And then Shastri Maharaj asked the same question to Yogiji Maharaj કે તમારો શું કાર્યક્રમ છે? Now Yogiji Maharajનો કાર્યક્રમ was also fixed કે he was going back to Gondal, because he was the Mahant of Gondal Mandir. And ત્યાં વિચરણ કરતા અને મંદિરની સેવા કરતા. But Shastri Maharaj didn't, Yogiji Maharaj didn't say કે મારે ગોંડલ જવાનું છે. Yogiji Maharaj said કે when Shastri Maharaj કે તમારો શું કાર્યક્રમ છે, the Yogiji Maharaj gave the reply કે આપ કહો તે કાર્યક્રમ, કે whatever you say is my program. So when Shastri Maharaj heard this, he turned to Swami Shri and he said કે આટલું જ તારે સમજવાનું છે. Basically, he was also telling Swami Shri about the importance of Yogiji Maharaj and explaining કે આટલું જ આપણે સમજવાનું છે, કે whatever the Guru says is our program. Swami had already taken permission, but it's a lesson that Shastriji Maharaj taught to Swami Shri for us, not for Swami Shri, but for us to understand the importance of conduct and about the principles of saintliness. And then other prasangs that in Atladra, Shastriji Maharaj would also explain many shloks from the Bhagavad to Swami Shri. So it's like one-to-one teaching. Whatever Shastriji Maharaj had learned from his guru, Vijnanananda Swami, but he also learned from Rangacharya, and he also learned from his other gurus. So Maidar Sastri's son, Jivan Ram Sastri. So whatever he had learned from his gurus, Shastriji Maharaj was teaching that to his disciple, Sastri Narayan Swarup Das. And then also they went to Napar. Swami Shri also gave lab there for the Parayan. And they also went to Mumbai, and Swami Shri also gave lab there. And Shastriji Maharaj taught more shloks from the Satsang, from the Bhagavad to Swami Shri at the Surya Narayan farm. So not just studies, but saintliness. Swami Shastriji Maharaj was preparing, Shastriji Maharaj was nurturing his disciple to look after the institution in the future. Again, Swami was learning all these things directly from Shastriji Maharaj. Shastriji Maharaj was very careful as well to teach Swami Shri everything. At that time, there were talks happening. આ વ્યવહારની વાત હવે આપણે કરીએ છીએ. Management, the actual administration of the whole organization. So at that time, there were talks about reconciliation with Vartal, the Vartal Sanstha. And Shastriji Maharaj, when he would go for these talks, he would always keep Swami Shri with him. Again, Swami Shri was what? Around 22 years old at this time. And a very young sadhu. He didn't have any post. He wasn't the Kothari of Sarangpur yet. And he was just studying. But Shastriji Maharaj would insist on keeping Swami Shri with him. And once Swami Shri asked a question that, there's Samadhan જેવી વાત કરવાની હોય તો નિર્ગુણ સ્વામી હોય કે બીજા કોઈક સારા સંત હોય એમને તમે ભેગા રાખો. You should keep Nirgun Swami or some other senior sadhus. And Shastriji Maharaj, what did he say? He goes કે તારે આગળ મોટા કામ કરવા પડશે, તે અત્યારથી સાથે રાખ્યા છે, આગળ કરવું પડશે. That you have many great tasks ahead of you. That's why I have kept you with me from now. It will all fall on you in the future. So you can see that Swami Shri was being taught directly by Shastriji Maharaj. Another prasang that we often hear, and Bapa used to say with his own voice as well, that once they were in Sarangpur, and Swami Shri saw that Shastriji Maharaj was involved in so many matters. It may be administration, it may be some legal matter. It would be meeting the Hari Bhaktas and sorting out their issues. So seeing Shastriji Maharaj taking care of so many little things and so many big things as well, because there was a big sanstha to run, a lot of Mandir work to do as well. As we explained, none of these Mandirs were complete. All the work was going on simultaneously. And despite all this, Shastriji Maharaj would remain composed and calm and peacefully provide solutions to all. And when Swami Shri saw all this, he asked a question to Shastriji Maharaj, કે આપની આગળ આવા અનેક પ્રશ્નો અને ફરિયાદો આવે છે, વળી મંદિરોનો વ્યવહાર પણ સંભાળવાનો રહે છે, અને તેમાં તમને કંટાળો નથી આવતો? You have to tackle so many issues, so many complaints. And on top of that, you have to take care of the works of the Mandir. So don't you ever become frustrated with all this? And Shastriji Maharaj simply replied, કે મહારાજ સ્વામીની સેવા કરવામાં કંટાળો ન હોય, કે તેમાં આનંદ થાય અને તારા માથે આવશે ત્યારે ખબર પડશે. Taught all these lessons of saintliness, of wisdom, and of management to Swami Shri. And Swami Shri firmly imbibed all these teachings from Shastriji Maharaj. There's also a mention at that time Shastri Maharaj had to go to Bhavnagar for about 20 to 25 days for treatment of his arthritis. And at that time Swami Shri remained with him. He served him as a sevak and pleased Shastriji Maharaj that, Shastri Maharaj remained very, very comfortable. So Swami Shri was multitasking, doing all these things all at once. Otherwise you think, I need to study, let me just concentrate on my studies. I need to do the Mandir work, let me just concentrate on that. But Swami was doing everything, learning from Shastriji Maharaj and also serving from Shastriji Maharaj at the same time. Then many different smurtis that Swami had, again which he would recollect in his later years as well. Because this was also Swami, like we have been taught in Satsang, કે આપણે સ્મૃતિ કરવી. તો સ્વામી પણ શાસ્ત્રીજી મહારાજના પ્રસંગો, યોગી બાપાના પ્રસંગોની ઘણી વખત સ્મૃતિ કરતા. So there's a prasang written in the Jivan Charitra, 2 prasangs. It mentions when Swami was in, Shastriji Maharaj was in Gondal. Now this is in 1944, around the time of Sharad Punam. And there was a Akhandun, a 24-hour Akhandun. આપણી અખંદૂન 12 કલાકમાં પતી જાય વલિંગબ્રહ્મા. ઓનલાઈન આપણી 1 કલાકમાં પતી જાય. This was a 24-hour Akhandun at that time in Gondal. And Bailal Bhai was chanting the Dun. And Shastriji Maharaj, when he came to the Sabha, he also sat in the Dun. Now Shastriji Maharaj could play the Dilruba. A Dilruba is like a violin, similar to a violin, you can see. It's an Indian instrument, a beautiful instrument. And આપણા ઘણા ભજનો આપણે સાંભળીએ છીએ દિલરુબા સાથે. યોગીચરણ સ્વામી પેલું વંદુ સહજાનંદ દિલરુબા વગાડતા પણ ગાતા. તો શાસ્ત્રી Maharaj used to play the Dilruba. And when Shastri Maharaj played the Dilruba, this is during the Akhandun, everyone was so happy. The whole atmosphere became divine. And some people even went into Samadhi. So Swami, when he was asked in 2004 to recite his favorite incident with Shastriji Maharaj, the Swami spoke about this incident in Gondal. At that time, Swami also mentioned another incident, another prasang when they were in Sarangpur. And Sarangpur, the Hari Bhaktas, they requested Shastriji Maharaj that, Sriji Maharaj played ras hai. Apne khabar chhe na the prasang of Sadguru Khele Vasant, when Maharaj touched the chest of Gunatidanand Swami and asked, Seva Sadguru kaun? So the Hari Bhaktas requested Shastriji Maharaj to play, not to play ras, to sit, so they could play ras. Shastriji Maharaj obviously was ill. And Shastriji Maharaj then sat on a chair in the middle. You can see the drashya in the Mandir courtyard. And then the Hari Bhaktas, they played ras by going round Shastriji Maharaj. And they were extremely happy. Prabhudas Lalaji, apra che, Prabhudas Lalaji of Kampala, and our sons, apra Gani che, pachi Hari Bhai che, and apra 6 sons he had. Apre je Kampala ni murti rakhi che, અને જે ઇઝલિંગ્ટનમાં યોગી બાપાએ પધરાવી હતી એ પણ એમના ઘરે એ મૂર્તિ હતી. તો એ પ્રભુદાસ લાલાજી would sing at that time, આજ મારે ઘેર થાય લીલા લેર. એકદમ કેફવાળા ભક્ત હતા. બાપા પણ ઘણી વખત એની વાત કરતા. And in this way the Hari Bhaktas, they did ras, and Shastriji Maharaj gave great smurti to everyone. So Bapa also remembered this prasang many, many years later. The Gondal prasang about the Dilruba in the Akhandun, and also this prasang of the ras in Sarangpur. Another prasang that Bapa used to remember, because Bapa was studying in Ahmedabad. Now Shastri Maharaj would come to Ahmedabad quite often. Every year he would celebrate Ankut, usually in Sarangpur, just like Bapa used to celebrate Ankut in Gondal. પણ અમુક વખત પછી ગોંડલમાં સારંગપુર પણ જાય અને લંડન પણ આવી જાય અંકુટ માટે. So Shastri Maharaj would often celebrate the festival of Ankut in Sarangpur. Then he would take that prasad and he would visit Ahmedabad. And on Prabodhini Ekadashi, again that's another big Ekadashi, he would distribute that prasad to the local devotees. So at that time they used to stay in Amriwadi Port. You can see Amriwadi Port. અત્યારે તો નાનું મંદિર, the place where Bapa was made Pramukh. પણ એ વખત બબુભાઈ કોઠારીનું ઘર પણ હતું ત્યાં આંબરીવાડી પોળમાં. where Bapa got Parshadi Diksha. So a fire broke out in the shop below where this Shastri Maharaj's Uttara was, the Mandir room. It was a small, it counted as a Mandir, it was just a house. And a fire broke out, so everyone shouted, come out quickly. But Shastri Maharaj, the packets it had been prepared of the prasad, Shastri Maharaj, he retrieved all those packets and then he came out. So we shouldn't take such a risk. Sastri Maharaj is a Satpurush chair, so he's independent. But Sastri Maharaj, despite this, Hari Bhaktas got worried and they said, come out quickly. But he didn't come out quickly. He went and got the packets. Fortunately, nothing happened to him. And Sastri Maharaj then said, how can we let Thakurji's prasad go to waste? So in this way, Swami used to remember this prasang as well. And Swami wrote in his diary, he said that remember what has been experienced. This in itself is one type of labh. Maniyu tenu smaran karvu e che ek lanu. Lanu etle labh. So you can see that Swami used to write all these prasangs down as well and keep this smrti of his Guru, Sastriji Maharaj. And then Sastriji Maharaj started building the fourth Mandir. Now this building of the fourth Mandir was in Atladra. And Atladra ma e wakate, as we mentioned, that there were not many people to work on the Mandir. So the sadhus and the devotees themselves would engage in the construction work. So at that time they used to use limestone instead of cement. And first of all, Bapa used to do that seva, the seva of mixing the limestone. And Bapa, he would say these things. Okay, there used to be a big wheel of stone. You can see this is a drashya from Sarangpur actually, from 1990. This is Bapa with Dev Prasad Swami. At that time, Dev Prasad Swami was in charge of overseeing the construction work. And Pachati Dev Prasad Swami was the Mahant of Gadra. It was Dhamma gaya, but Bapa kept Dev Prasad Swami with him. And Bapa used to say, he was my boss when we were working in Atladra. Seva karta, ke he amara upri hata. Ane emni agna ma amare revanu. Ane je kaam amne sope, e pramane ame karta. This was when Bapa was young in Atladra. So there used to be this big wheel of stone. And Bapa would say, 2 oxen would pull the stone wheel round and round. Sand and water would be mixed with the limestone, which would be crushed. And then we would walk behind with a shovel, like a spade, scraping the extra material from the wheel. And then after 108 rounds like this, 108 pradakshina karwani, the limestone mix would be ready. There were no machines in those days. And then it would be gathered in piles and passed on to the bricklayers. So they could use that limestone, just like they use cement, they could use that limestone. So Dev Prasad Swami, normally they would do 2 loads or 3 loads. Sometimes Dev Prasad Swami would say, no, I want another load. But Swami, all day, from the morning, early in the morning, and all the way till the evening, 7 p.m., Swami would be doing this seva. Now, because of the heat of the limestone, Swamishi's seva was such that because of the heat of the limestone, ke Swami na sharir ma, these red spots appeared. Apne je kahe ne ke lal chata. They appeared over Swamishi's body, all over his body, including his face. He did not worry about his body when he was engaged in seva. But Swami Shri, because of these red spots, he fell ill. And then at that time, Sastriji Maharaj himself was ill. He was in Jareshwar and he had a chest infection. And again, like we saw the prasang when Sastriji Maharaj was ill with arthritis in Sarangpur, we saw the prasang last time. And he said to Tulsi Bai of Purushothampura, કે નાયંડા આવે અને ભક્ત ચિંતામણી સંભળાવે તો આવી રીતે મને સારું થઈ જાય. He Sastriji Maharaj said something similar. કે Sastriji Maharaj, he said કે it would be good if Nayanda was to come here. That's all he said. કે નાયંડા આવે તો સારું. And when Swami Shri again heard this news, he was in Atladra. In the previous prasang again he was in Atladra. But this time he rushed all the way to Jareshwar. Jareshwar is near Bharuch. આપણું જે મંદિર અત્યારે ભરૂચનું છે on the highway. That's actually in Jareshwar. So that's where Sastriji Maharaj was. He was resting on a bed in front of the murtis. And there was a small mandir. એ વખત તો બીજી કાંઈ વ્યવસ્થા નહોતી. And as soon as Sastriji Maharaj, he saw Nayanda, he said, now my illness will go away. And then Sastriji Maharaj, he took a report. He asked Swami Shri, how is the work in Atladra? And then he saw the spots on Swami Shri's face. He asked Swami Shri, what happened? And then Swami Shri explained what happened. And immediately Sastriji Maharaj, he took his hands and Swami Shri na moda upar, Swami Shri na sharir upar, emne hath feravya. And Sastriji Maharaj even gave him some herbal medication out of his potlu. And he said to Swami Shri, take this as well. So in this way, duapan malya, blessings, and a dawapan mali, medication. Dua ane dawa. And Shastriji Maharaj Sathe, Swamiji stayed for about a week. And then at that time, Swamiji would recite the Bhakti Chintamani daily, just as he did in Sarangpur. And Shastriji Maharaj used to give blessings to Swamiji every single day. So within a week, all these red spots on Swamiji's face and on his body, they all disappeared within 1 week. But just one small spot remained, which many of us have had darshan. That spot was visible until around 1980. And you can see that spot on Swamiji's nose. Apne juna photo joye ne 1974 na, when Bapa came here, 1977, 1980, that Swamiji had those spots on his face as a reminder of the seva that he did and a reminder of his Guru's Ashirvad. At that time, once Swamiji wrote in his diary, because even in his later years, up to at least 1974, Swamiji would remember these old prasangs of Shastriji Maharaj and write them in his diary. So once Swamiji wrote in his diary, કે પોતે પોતાના મનવાળનું નિમિત્ત ઊભું કરી મને સેવામાં બોલાવી મારો રોગ અને દાગ કાઢી નાખ્યા તેમ દયા કરી. Again, everything that happened, Swamiji would give all the credit to the Guru. And he said that under the guise of his own illness, Swami called me for seva. He relieved me of my illness and my spots. That was his compassion. So taking care of him. And at that time, Shastriji Maharaj was very happy. And after about a week, he gave permission for Swamiji to return to Atladra. And then he also said, don't engage now in the work of the limestone. Let others do that, but you engage in other seva. And not just that, Shastriji Maharaj also wrote to Dev Prasad Swami, because he was the supervisor. And Shastriji Maharaj wrote that, Naindane biji seva soppi, but don't involve him in the limestone seva. So that's how Shastriji Maharaj used to look after his disciple. Now we've got about 4 or 5 chapters left. We'll just cover those before we do the Aarti. Again, Swami's Seva. This is similar to a prasang that happened when Bapa was a Parshad, a Shanti Bhagat in Bochasan. You may remember Shastriji Maharaj gave him Diksha in Ahmedabad, Parshad Diksha. And after that, they went for the Kartik Punam Utsav in Bochasan. Again, there was some Seva to do. And all the devotees joined in the Seva, but one by one, they left to do other things. But Shanti Bhagat, he continued doing the Seva. And at that time, Shastriji Maharaj, when he returned, he was very happy. So a similar prasang. In Bochasan, after Shastriji Maharaj's birth anniversary was celebrated, Vasant Panchami, Shastriji Maharaj sat in the campus and work was involved regarding cleaning of the campus. So Shastriji Maharaj, after a while, he got up to do some other seva. And at that time, the Hari Bhaktas, they also decided, for whatever reason, emne pan biji kai seva ase ke ghare jawan hoy ke whatever. But after a short while, only Swami Shri and 2 devotees were left. And Shastriji Maharaj, before his lunch, he came there at 12:30 p.m. And he saw Swami doing seva. He was so happy and he gave him lots of blessings. So Swami was not interested in Dekhau. The chapter title is Dekhau Nahi Pan Bhakti Bhav. He was only interested in devotion and serving his Guru. In the same way, Shastriji Maharaj would continue to look after his disciple. E vakat rajai pan ochi hati. It is Shastriji Maharaj would keep a special rajai for Narayan Swarup Das. And pachi Swami suwa ave late at night after finishing his seva, Shastriji Maharaj would wake up, give him the blanket, and then Bapa would sleep on the floor. So despite being so busy, despite being involved in festivals, and despite being involved in all the administrative work, Shastriji Maharaj himself used to look after his young disciple. There's another prasang in the book, કે નાવમાં માવની સાથે. માવ એટલે ભગવાન માટે નામ છે. એટલે આ ભગવાન જેવા સત્પુરુષ એમના ગુરુ સાથે છે. So again, they were going to a place called Nahar. Not Nar, but a place called Nahar. And they had to cross the water. So they sat on a boat. But there were many difficulties. So Nirgunda Swami ઉતાવળ્યા થોડાક અને આકરા થઈ જાય. પણ શાસ્ત્રી મહારાજ એમને શાંત કરે કે આ ગરમ થવાથી કંઈ સારું થવાનું છે. So Shastri Maharaj himself also used to calm Nirgunda Swami down. Nirgunda Swami was worried, okay, let's get there on time so that we can do seva and do the parayan and look after the Hari Bhaktas. He had no other intents in mind. And then also on the return journey, they had the same issues. So all these issues with traveling by boat, you can see Swami Shri had to undergo with Shastriji Maharaj But again, Swami used to remember this in his later years, that Nirgundas Swami akra thai, but Shastriji Maharaj used to keep him calm, and in this way, we managed to go to these places and we did Vichran with Shastriji Maharaj. And then finally, the opening of the Atladra Mandir, that was in July 1945. So the last few prasangs are to do with the Mandir in Atladra. Up till now, Shastriji Maharaj had opened 3 Mandirs. The first one in Bochasan, the second one in Sarangpur, and the third one in Gondal. Bochasan, 1907, the dates are just for our information. Don't worry if you can't remember them. But you understand, Shastriji Maharaj left Vartal in 1905. He the building was not complete until Shastriji Maharaj passed away. And આપણું building તો ચાલ્યા જ કરે. પછી તો આ રીતે it was developed by Yogi Bapa, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and અત્યારે પણ કામ ચાલતું હશે. So the first mandir was in Bochasan, second in Sarangpur, the third in Gondal. And then the fourth one, Shastriji Maharaj was building in Atladra. We saw many prasangs. And that was due to be opened in July. Now most of the other mandirs, they were opened in the month of Vaishak, but in May or June. But for some reason, Shastriji Maharaj decided to open the mandir in Atladra in July, in the month of Ashad, during the season of monsoon. So again, that also led to various problems as well. But again, while Swami Shri was involved in the Seva, Swami Shri was not afraid, even though again he was very young. He was 23, 24 years old. He was there continuously for 8 to 10 months, involved in various sevas. Swami Shri often said, I would walk around on the scaffolding quite easily. I wasn't afraid. I would often climb to the top, and I wouldn't have any issue with balancing. Even if there's a small height. And in this way, Swami Shri would do seva. Swami would also toil to operate the pulley system. There was a pulley system in those days of chains to transport the stones from the bottom all the way to the top of the mandir. Now once when Swami Shri was involved in this seva, he suffered an injury. Now these stones, they would come from Porbandar. And then they would go from Porbandar to Bharuch by sea. And then they would go from Bharuch, where they would be released. And then they would come to Atladra, to the station, the train station. And then these stones would be offloaded from the wagon. So Bapa also said that once some stones came to the station and they needed to be offloaded. And Dev Prasad Swami, again, he was a supervisor. And he took Swami, look, you have to come and help us to get the stones. Swami said, look, I'll do other seva. I don't mind coming, but I don't understand much about these stones. But Dev Prasad Swami wanted to train him as well. So he took Swami, insisted. So Swami said there was me, Harjivan Das, Dev Prasad, and 2 others. And there were open wagons. And when they tried to move the stones, they would put rollers under the stone. So they would use chisels to lift the stone on one side, Harjivan Das and Dev Prasad Swami. And on the other side, Swami would have to insert the packing material to support the stone. Now, not realizing that Swami was putting the packing in, these 2 sadhus, they used the chisel to lift the stone. And Swami's 2 fingers, Swami says, the first 2 fingers of my right hand became crushed, as if sandwiched. Bapa used the word sandwich when he said this prasang. And then with the full weight of the stone, I suddenly felt faint and I must have fallen down unconscious. So Swami pan e wakate beban thei gaya. And after about 1.5 hours, Swami regained consciousness. They immediately took him to the mandir, and there he regained consciousness. The doctor came as well. They bandaged Bapa's fingers. And then Bapa, in his own words, we'll see the video on Friday as well. Bapa said that Shastriji Maharaj was also there. And after the bandages were applied, Shastriji Maharaj gave blessings. And he said, look, don't worry, it will get better. Your fingers will get better. And Shastriji Maharaj said, something worse was going to happen, but it has finished in this way. And in this way, Swami lost both the nails on 2 fingers. This is 2 fingers on his right hand next to the thumb. But the nail on the middle finger came back, and the index fingernail never grew back properly. Even if you saw Swami's pictures in his later years, you can see that it was like half a nail there. But Shastriji Maharaj, Swami was committed to serving. Even after this, Swami said that, look, all we wanted to do was to please Shastriji Maharaj. Shastriji Maharaj, he did our Raksha, and after being bandaged, we still continued the Seva, the same Seva of unloading the stone and transporting the stone. It wasn't like, okay, we can't do this Seva now, and we'll do other Seva. So in this way, Swami did Seva, Seva, and Seva. No excuses. No excuses, no arguments, no complaints, no expectations. એ સ્વામીશ્રીના જીવનમાં આપણને આવી રીતે એ દેખાય છે. So again, during that time, again, just before the Pratishtha, Shastriji Maharaj, he was there in Atladra. Now, Shastriji Maharaj also, another thing he did at that time, आपने देखा कि Shastriji Maharaj vision, he used to tell the santos, okay, put metal clamp between the joints of the stones, so in case there's an earthquake. So Shastriji Maharaj was thinking that far ahead as well. At that time, you can see this Mandir in Atladra. This is the time of the Pratishtha. There was no shikhars. There were no domes. There was no mandirs with pillars. All you can see is the part of the ground floor and part of je આપણે કહીએ ને કે ઠાકોરજી જ્યાં બેસે ને અને કોરી મંડપ કે જે where જારીની આગળ જે જગ્યા જ્યાં સંતો ઊભા હોય કે નગારું હોય ને, that's called the કોરી મંડપ. That part was ready for the Pratishtha. કારણ કે you have to have that ready so you can have the murtis. And you need to have a covering over that Kori Mandap. Otherwise, obviously, water is going to go in. So, just before the Pratishtha, it was raining. It was monsoon season. Everyone requests, and the Kori Mandap needed to be covered up. Now, you can't work in the pouring rain. And plus, water would keep going inside. So, everyone requested Shastriji Maharaj, okay, look, Swami, how can we carry on like this? We need to complete the work. Pratishtha is just a few days away. It would be good if the rain stopped. And you would expect Shastriji Maharaj to give Ashirwad કે ના બંધ થઈ જશે. Shastriji Maharaj કે look, અષાઢ મહિનો છે, વરસાદ તો હોય જ ને અષાઢ મહિનામાં. અને Shastriji Maharaj કે આજકાલના જુવાનિયા હોય ને, મા બાપનું સાંભળતા ન હોય, એ રીતે આ વરસાદ આવો છે કે સાંભળે પણ નહીં કદાચ. એટલે એ રીતે Shastriji Maharaj said કે just as the youths of the day don't listen to their parents, the rain is also the same. So Swami understood what Shastriji Maharaj was saying. So under the direction of, there was a mystery, Van Ravan mystery. And Swami and Harjivan Swami, they decided, okay, let's get on with this. And the work that would take 15 days, they'd finish in 2 days. Shastriji Maharaj was very, very happy, and in this way they completed that work. Swami was also involved in getting the murtis. At that time, there were the murtis in the Madhya Khand and the murtis in the Pratham Khand. So the marble murtis were the murtis of Hari Krishna Maharaj and Lakshmi Narayan Dev. Just before they were being carved in Vadodara, there was a mason, Salat કહેવાય ને, he had come to Vadodara and he was carving the murtis. એમાં Hari Krishna Maharajની મૂર્તિ damaged થઈ ગઈ. So there were only 2 murtis ready. And when the santos went to get the murtis, the guy said, look, I want money for all 3 murtis. Otherwise, I'm not going to give you any of these murtis. And again, that was a big issue which Swami Shri dealt with. In the end, they managed to get the money from somebody else and they had to pay for the murtis, even though the Hari Krishna Maharaj murti wasn't ready. And any pratishtha pachi Shastriji Maharaj પાછળથી કરી. But in 1945, Shastriji Maharaj installed the murtis of Lakshmi Narayan. The murtis for the middle khand, the metal murtis of Dham, Dhami and Mukta. Those murtis as well, Swami went to get those murtis. Again, because it was raining and it was difficult to get those murtis to the Mandir. But again, Swami did all the Vyavastha, the vehicle, Appabai of Bhadran, he had an open vehicle. And in his vehicle, these murtis were brought to the Yagnashara just before the Pratishtha. So in this way, Swami Shri was involved in the Seva. There's a prasang when Vikram Bhagat also felt an electric shock and Swami ne pan thodo ઘણો shock લાગ્યો હતો. એ પ્રસંગ પણ Swami કહેતા. And you can see the drashya at that time in Atladra. કે the shikhars weren't ready. આ તો પાછળનો ફોટો છે. પણ એ વખત બધા જમે છે. એ વખતે you can see the Hari Bhaktas and the flags on top of where Thakurji had sat. And Swami Shri around that time, what he must have looked like. So Shastriji Maharaj આ પ્રતિષ્ઠા કરી અટલાદરામાં. અને during that time, people used to say, people asked Swami, કે તમે આટલી બધી સેવા કરતા. એ વખતે, you know, you were serving as a trustee. He wasn't an official trustee on paper, but he had all these administrative tasks to look after. કારણ કે એ વખતે આપણી સંસ્થાનું ટ્રસ્ટ પણ નહોતું થયું. અને સ્વામી બોલ્યા કે આપણામાં તો પહેલેથી જ આવી રીતે ટ્રેડિશન છે કે આપણા ગુરુએ આપણને શીખવાડ્યું છે કે આવી રીતે જે સેવા કરે એ જ આવી રીતે એ મહાન કહેવાય. એટલે ગુણાતીતનો વારસો છે. અને જે કામ કરે એ ટ્રસ્ટી, કામ કરે એ મોટા, એ ભંડારી, એ વિદ્વાન અને એ આચાર્ય કહેવાય. સેવા જ કરવાની છે ને શાસ્ત્રીજી મહારાજ પોતે કારખાનામાં આવે. We saw the photo of Shastriji Maharaj himself digging the foundations. તો એ રીતે સ્વામી શ્રી doing all this seva, he remained forever humble. And then the final chapter in the book, this is a prasang after Atladra Swami went to Mumbai. Again, another parayan. So parayan ni sathe Bapa would, so he did katha, he was also doing seva, and katha and seva ni sathe Swami was also doing tap. So that the description, the Swami would do nijra every Ekadashi. And not just every Ekadashi, every nom. And during the month, 3-4 ke 5 divas Swami would do nijra upvas. During Shravan Mahino, Swami would do Dharana Pana, fast for 1 whole month. So 1 day upvas, 1 day eat. And he would do that for 30 plus 15 days. On behalf of Shastriji Maharaj, he would also do another 15 days upvas. So 45 days every single year. Every single year, Swami was fasting like this. At that time, it's not like you get to eat a lot and have, a great meal before the upvas. There was samanya je kurmo hoy, ke bajro hoy, e jamine, the next day would be upvas. After fasting again for the parna, there was no special. Bapa kehta ke there was no lemons at that time. Khichdi and mag mali jai, e pramane we used to have this. So in this way, Swami Shri would also do tap in addition to seva and katha. Again, after Mumbai, Swami went to Sarangpur. Here he did a parayan on the Hari Lilamrit. We heard until now that Swami spoke on the Satsang Jivan, but Hari Lilamrit upar pan Swami e parayan kari, and towards the end of 1945, Swami also fell ill. He had kamro, what we call jaundice, and Shastriji Maharaj sent him to a Vaidya, the physician, Himmatlal Vaidya in Bhadran. And in Bhadran, Swami Shri took treatment for 1 month. He was only allowed to eat khakras made of chana along with rice. And Nirgun Swami was also there at the time in Bhadran having treatment. So Swami stayed with Nirgun Swami for about a month at that time in Bhadran as well and had treatment for his jaundice. So in this way, we've covered from 1940 to 1945. And now in the next session, we'll cover from 1946 up to when Shastriji Maharaj passed away to Akshardham in 1951. So આપણે પ્રાર્થના કરીએ તો these prasangs that we've heard, Swami doing smrti with his Guru Shastriji Maharaj, we can also do such smrti of prasangs that we may have had or may have seen or may have heard with Pramukh Swami Maharaj or Mahan Swami Maharaj. Shri Swaminarayan Bhagwanani Jai.